Right, Federalist Era Part 5. I'll just take up right where I left off with Thomas Jefferson. He believed that government should be minimalist, meaning not very much government. We should get by with the bare minimum number of rules and regulations. He understood we do need some. As somebody put it back at the Constitutional Convention, if men were angels, we wouldn't need government, but we're not. So he'd go that far with it. He's famously quoted as having said or written, "The government that governs least governs best." For that to work, you have to have a high level of what I referred to a while ago as public virtue. That's something they talked about in those days, applying not just to citizens, but also to people who are entrusted with government power. You're going to set up a government, it's going to have some power. Somebody's going to get elected to wield that power. You have to be able to trust them. Since there's not really any entity that can throw a penalty flag, you have to be able to trust them to use that power to the extent that it is used for the public benefit, not private benefit. Now, you're taking a chance. You're placing a bet when you do that. So the odds were, according to Jefferson, that there's a better chance that established men with sort of aristocratic views who are not on the make, their culture is not defined by their acquisitiveness that much, they are a better bet to use government power for the public benefit than were businessmen and bankers who have probably come from nothing. They've got some wealth and they'd like some more. No, you know what? You realize there's never enough. There's nobody that has enough. So the idea that wealth brings happiness, as some have said, well, wealth cannot buy happiness, but it has been known to cause an occasional smile. That's about it. Because if there was enough, there'd be enough, but there isn't. I'm going to say, just from me to you, there is a whole lot to be said for just being satisfied. I'm off the subject, but I'm not really. Okay? Success is getting what you want. Happiness is wanting what you get. Keep that close to your heart. All right. So Jefferson is deeply distrustful of concentrations of power, either in public hands or private hands. One little more thing here. Jefferson's hard to pin down because his views ended up being fluid. We're talking about the Jefferson of the 1790s. All right, when Washington and Adams were president, it's all theoretical. He's theorizing about this. Now, in 1800, he's going to be elected President of the United States, and that's going to make things look different. So Jefferson will enter the presidency. We're not up to that yet, but I'll prefigure it with some fairly well-taken views about the dangers of power, and virtually every one of them he's going to chunk. He's going to end up flipping on virtually all of this once the power was in his hands. I guess he felt he could trust himself with it. He didn't trust anybody else. There you go. Jefferson also believed that government should be decentralized, which simply meant that his view of which level of government is most important would seem inverted to people almost ever since. The most important level was local government, like a county government. Because why? Because that is closest to the people. They have some chance of actually influencing local government, and they can just set things up the way they want them. And to the extent that government is decentralized, you're not dealing with one-size-fits-all policies shoved up your bohiney by somebody somewhere else that thinks they're smarter than you are. So that's the most important level. State government would be less important and should confine itself to a short list of things only a state government should do, because it's effectively beyond the reach of most people. Only a few people could hope to influence it. National government, that's extremely remote. And Jefferson's views would have been shared by most people. What the national government does, they're not even accustomed to the idea of national government. It just wasn't very important. It takes a while for people to get the clue that national government's important. So Jefferson believes that government should be decentralized. Now, Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton's views are basically economic. His politics flow from economics. The The political things he wanted to do were all means to an end. The ends were economic. Now, Alexander Hamilton seems to have perceived that the future lay in industrialization. The English had taken the lead on the Industrial Revolution, had begun in England in the 1760s, and that's gradual, it doesn't make headlines, but how many other people do you suppose in 1790 could have seen that coming? So Hamilton believes that we should emulate Britain in that and maybe a few other ways toward becoming a financial or economic or an industrial powerhouse. The problem here, and Hamilton is our first Secretary of the Treasury, in order for the United States to prosper economically, there's some pieces of the political puzzle that still have to be put in place because the odds do not look good. In fact, the odds of the Constitution being kept around indefinitely don't look good either. What we had when we first started this thing, 1789, was that people still identified with their state. They referred to their state as their country, and they referred, I'm not making this up, they referred to people from other states as foreigners. Okay? Example, 1786 or so, during the Articles period, merchants in New York City were complaining to the government of their state because they wanted protection from what they called foreign competition. Where did the foreign competition come from? Connecticut and New Jersey. That was foreign competition. So you got a long way to go. All right, nationalism is not here yet. Hamilton was a nationalist, or perhaps we should say a proto-nationalist. Okay. Another example, the revolution had just happened, and there's some buzzwords out there like freedom and liberty, and not everybody really understood what that was about. Example, another one, John Adams, back home after the revolution, he'd spent from the revolution into a good bit of the 1780s. He was over in Europe serving as a diplomat. One brief visit home, a ship brought him over, let him off on the shore, walked in on his house, hugged his wife, spent the night. There you go. But he had reported encountering a neighbor of his. He had some farmland himself, met a neighboring farmer who just so excited, so blown away. This is after the war, because we won our independence. Now we have freedom and liberty. And Adams is increasingly horrified as the conversation proceeds because this neighbor of his apparently thought that freedom and liberty meant now there wouldn't be any more government or any more laws. And he was so happy about it. All right, this is going to be a problem. So, for this economic growth Hamilton wants to see, to have that happen, there's something you got to have that you don't have yet: political stability. That simply means something we take pretty much for granted, that the belief that the government, the federal government, is going to be there. You can depend on it because you want potential investors to invest. You want there to be more potential investors. How do you do that? Okay. They're going to be less likely to do that. Investors don't invest unless they have confidence in the future. They don't know what's going to happen. They're not going to go out on a limb. They're just not. So they have to have confidence that the government is going to still be there 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that it's going to be capable of maintaining its own existence. It's going to be capable of keeping order, keeping the roads safe, making sure that contracts are enforceable, providing a stable currency that doesn't inflate a big bunch, things that only a pretty strong central government can do. And Hamilton is not completely alone in wanting that, but that's not the majority viewpoint. Nobody even sees the need for it. So how do you do that? Hamilton, as it turns out, knew how. He was an astute observer of things. He actually admired the way the British were doing things. Now, he fought through the war for independence, but then at the Constitutional Convention, it's like he's pleading for an elective monarchy. That doesn't mean he wants to go back with Britain, but the British, okay, maybe I should more technically say the English, after an extremely turbulent 17th century where they had a civil war, they abolished the monarchy, they cut one king's head off and then fired another one. Very turbulent century, but then from the late 1600s down to the time of the Revolution, more than a century, dead calm. They had established political stability, steel reinforced concrete stability. How did they do it? Now, without telling you how they did it, and had to do with how they managed their national debt, Hamilton wanted to adapt those principles to America. Now, he's Treasury Secretary, and in 1789, they handed him his dream assignment. Congress passed a resolution giving the Treasury Department, which meant Hamilton and less than 10 other people, the job of the national debt. They want to know how much money the federal government owes, who do we owe it to, and how would we be best advised to pay it back. Okay? That's Hamilton's dream assignment. Hold me back. So in 1790, he, having tabulated all the data he could find, he presents to Congress his reply on that. It was called the Report on the Public Credit. Okay? How much money do we owe? And by the way, the debt takes the form primarily, remember the old Continentals? Those were debt instruments that were, promises, pieces of paper representing promises by the government, whatever the government was, to pay the face value to whoever has it someday down the road. Worthless Continentals, they're still circulating at pennies on the dollar. That's most of it. The rest of it would be owed to foreign banks, French banks, Dutch banks, and such as that, left over from the war. All right. Federal government owes around $54 million, an immense sum for that time. About $42 million of that was owed to American citizens who were in possession of these old Continentals. The other $12 million or so was owed to foreign creditors. Hamilton strongly urges paying off the foreign debt first, because Hamilton's worst nightmare was the U.S. government being in debt to foreign interests. Because if you're a debtor, whoever you owe the debt to, in a way, controls you. We want to be independent. We want to get out from under that, get that done first. Now, his proposal in the Report on the Public Credit is going to double as his way of establishing political stability. In fact, he was so gleeful about that, he's famously quoted as referring to the national debt as a blessing. Some years ago, I read a splendid little book by a conservative historian, The History of the National Debt, and the title of it was Hamilton's Blessing. I recommend it. The book, that is. All right. How do you establish political stability? Now, the way the British did it was by giving the moneyed classes of people a vested financial interest in maintaining the government. You do that, and whatever government you got is going to be completely safe from any attempt at overthrow. And how exactly is this going to work? In face-to-face classes, I would do this, okay? Follow me here. I would tell the students we're about to act out a living political cartoon, but don't worry, you won't have to stand up or act stupid. I'll take care of that, as usual. Here's the deal. Let's imagine hypothetically that I owe you a lot of money. How much is a lot? It's hypothetical anyway. Whatever turns your wheel, I owe you a lot of money. Now, it's well understood by us both that if I should die prematurely, you will never get your money. Only if I live long and prosper would you get paid off. Now, you may not care for me at all as a person, but every time we meet, you're wanting to know if I'm getting enough sleep. Oh no. Enough exercise? I try. Am I eating properly? Am I staying on my meds? Are you asking me that because you care for me? No. You want to know because you have a vested financial interest in my survival. Only if I live will you get your money. Now, political cartoons are allegories. In this cartoon, you are the investor class. I I'm Uncle Sam, the federal government